The UK Telephone Numbering Plan, also known as the National Telephone Numbering Plan, is the system used for assigning telephone numbers in the United Kingdom and its Crown dependencies. It is regulated by the UK Government's Office of Communications, which holds responsibility for telecommunications. Overview: since April 28, 2001, almost all geographic numbers and most non-geographic numbers have 9 or 10 national numbers after the zero trunk code. All mobile telephone numbers have 10 national numbers after the zero trunk code. The overall structure of the UK's National Numbering Plan is a short sample of geographic numbers, set out in the officially approved number groups. In the United Kingdom, area codes are 2, 3, 4, or, rarely, 5 digits long. Regions with shorter area codes, typically large cities, permit the allocation of more telephone numbers as the local number portion has more digits. Local customer numbers are 4 to 8 figures long. The total number of digits is 10, but in a very few areas the total may be 9 digits. The area code is also referred to as an STD, or a dialing code in the UK. The code allocated to the largest population is for London. The code allocated to the largest area is for all of Northern Ireland. The UK numbering plan also applies to 3 British Crown dependencies: Jersey, Guernsey and the Isle of Man, even though they are not part of the UK itself. For dialing the United Kingdom from overseas, Ofcom and ITUT recommendation E123 states that numbers should be written in the form. It is common to see the form +44 0 Xxxx used instead. This form is not recommended by Ofcom because it might confuse the reader. Callers within the United Kingdom replace the +44 with the number 0. Calling +44 A0XXXAXXXXXXXX will not work from most operators. It is therefore recommended to show the number in either the national or the international format, but not a mixture of both formats. The international format shows only those digits that overseas callers must dial. Storing any UK telephone number in a mobile phone, or directly dialing it from the keypad, in the correct +44, area code local number international format allows the number to work when the mobile is calling out from any country of the world, including whilst still located within the UK. The plus sets the number type to international and so no international access code is required. Format: possible number formats for UK telephone numbers are as follows. Number ranges starting 01 can have NSN length as 10 or 9 digits. The 0800 range can have NSN length as 10, 9 or 7 digits. The 0845 range can have NSN length as 10 or 7 digits. The 0500 range has NSN length as 9 digits only. There are no telephone numbers in the UK with an NSN length of 8 digits. Geographic numbering. Standard geographic numbers. Geographic telephone numbers in the UK always have 9 or 10 digits. 4-digit area codes. 4-digit area codes have either 6-digit subscriber numbers or a mix of 5 and 6-digit subscriber numbers. 01XXX, XXXXXX, this is the format used by most areas. It has a 4-digit area code and a 6-digit subscriber number, and is known as 4+6 format. These area codes were changed by adding a 1 directly after the initial 0 as a part of Phone Day in 1995. Just short of 581 areas use this format, and the area codes range from 01200 to 01998. A small number of these areas also have a few subscriber numbers that have only 5 digits. That is, almost all area codes now have only 6-digit local numbers. For example, 6 of the 4-digit area codes are known as mixed areas as they share those 4 digits with the 12 5-digit area codes. This leads to a restriction as to which initial digits can be used for subscriber numbers within those 4-digit area codes. For example, in the 01387 4-digit area code, subscriber numbers cannot begin with a 3 because 013873 is a separate 5-digit area code. Likewise, in the 01946 4-digit area code, Subscriber numbers cannot begin with a 7 because 019467 is a separate 5-digit area code. 01Xxx, Xxxxxx, this is used for 40 smaller towns where some subscriber numbers within the area code have only 5 digits and is known as 4+5 format. The numbers therefore have only 9 digits after the initial 0 trunk code. These area codes were changed by adding a 1 directly after the initial 0 as a part of Phone Day in 1995. These towns always have a mixture of 6 and 5-digit local numbers, each type allocated in specific DE blocks. For example, in the 01647 area code, numbers beginning 24Xxx and 61Xxx have 5 digits, whereas all other DE blocks within that area code are allocated as 6-digit numbers. The number of places with 5-digit subscriber numbers and an 01Xxx area code has declined rapidly in recent decades. There were 511 ranges allocated across 56 different area codes in January 1998. The big number change removed many, especially in Northern Ireland, and by July 2005 there were only 329 ranges and 42 codes. By April 2010 this had reduced to 324 ranges and 40 codes, with the same number still in use in November 2012. The 40 area codes are listed in the table below. 3-digit area codes. 3-digit area codes always have 7-digit subscriber numbers and always begin 011X or 01X1. 01X1, Xxxxxxx. This is the geographic number format for the first round of 5 large cities moved to all-figure dialing in the 1960s, and subsequently also used in the metropolitan county of Tyne and Wear, Eastern County Durham and southeastern Northumberland from the 1980s onwards. These 6 areas have a 3-digit area code matching the pattern 1x1 and a 7-digit subscriber number, and this is known as 3+7 format. These area codes were changed by adding a 1 directly after the initial 0 as a part of Phone Day in 1995. 011X, Xxxxxxx. This is the geographic number format for the second round of large cities and towns moved to brand new 3-digit area codes. 5 of these were moved in 1995 as a part of Phone Day. Reading followed a year later. At the time of the change, an extra digit was added to the subscriber number. These 6 areas have a 3-digit area code matching the pattern 11X, with a 7-digit subscriber number, and this is known as 3+7 format. The first 3 digits of the local number identifies a small area within the town or city. The former Reading area code had already been changed once, by adding a 1 directly after the initial 0 as a part of Phone Day in 1995. 2-digit area codes. 2-digit area codes always have 8-digit subscriber numbers and always begin 02. 02X, Xxxxxxx. This is the newest geographic number format. It is used for the third tier of large cities and for Northern Ireland, and was formed as a part of the big number change in 2000. The new area code is much shorter than the old one, and begins 02 unlike the previous 01 area codes. Numbers in these 5 areas are commonly misquoted, for example London as 0207 or Cardiff as 02920. The numbers consist of a 2-digit area code matching the pattern 02X, and an 8-digit subscriber number, and this is known as 2+8 format. The first 4 digits of the local number identifies a small area within the town or city. At the time of the change, the subscriber part of the number gained an extra digit in London, those in Northern Ireland gained 2 or 3 digits, and the subscriber part of the number in the other areas gained 2 digits. All of these areas were also subject to a previous code change, one that added a 1 directly after the initial 0, as a part of Phone Day in 1995. 5-digit area codes. 5-digit area codes have either 5-digit subscriber numbers or a mix of 4 and 5-digit subscriber numbers. 5-digit area codes always share their first 4 digits with 4-digit area codes. 01Xxx, Xxxxx and Xxxx. This is the oldest geographic number format and is used for 12 smaller towns and villages where the subscriber number is either 5 or 4 digits long. These are known as 5+5 and 5+4 format. Therefore the STD code and the subscriber number does not always total 10 digits after the initial 0 trunk code. These area codes were changed by adding a 1 directly after the initial 0 as a part of Phone Day in 1995. The number of places using these two formats has declined rapidly in recent decades, and Brampton is the last place in the UK with 4-digit local numbers. The above 12 area codes and their 6 parent area codes are known as mixed areas due to multiple area codes sharing the same SABC digits. National dialing-only ranges. These ranges have subscriber numbers beginning with the digits 0 or 1, for example. Currently, these numbers are mostly used as the termination points for non-geographic numbers, and by some automated systems such as alarms. As such, they are not usually meant to be directly dialed. These numbers have been problematic as some mobile phone operators in the UK do not allow access to these ranges, and there may also be difficulty accessing these numbers from outside the UK. Regulator Ofcom proposes that in future these numbers be released for wider, general-purpose use in up to 70 area codes facing number shortage. In order to avoid confusion with codes beginning with these digits, the area code must always be dialed, even from within the same geographic exchange. Accordingly, if these numbers are eventually released for general use, Ofcom proposes completely removing the ability to dial locally without the area code in areas affected. Mobile telephones, 07XxxxxxxxxXXXA mobile phones and WiFi numbers. Individual mobile phone companies are allocated different ranges within the 074Xx, 075Xx, 07624, 077Xx, 078Xx and 079Xx area codes. Changes to mobile phone numbers in the big number change were mostly straight replacements, such as Vodafone customers on the 0378 block became 07778. Since the advent of mobile number portability, mobile phone number prefixes can no longer be relied on to determine the current operator of a particular mobile phone, only the original operator. Pages and personal numbering, 07XxxxxxXXXXXA pages and personal numbering. 070 and 076 numbers are often charged at a much higher rate than calling the similar-looking 07Xxx mobile telephone numbers. Personal numbers beginning 070 are regulated by PhonePay Plus. Non-geographic numbering. Non-geographic numbers charged at geographic rate, 03XxxxxXXXXXXXA UK-wide numbering. On July 27, 2006, Ofcom announced that companies will soon be able to use an 03 non-geographic number, in place of other non-geographic numbers. Callers would be charged at the same rate as if they were calling a geographic number. This means that customers who are benefiting from free minutes on mobile phones or landlines would also be able to call these numbers using their inclusive minutes. On February 13, 2007, Ofcom released more details on their plans for the 03 range and announced that allocations of 03 numbers to providers would begin in March 2007. Whilst 01, 02 and 07 numbers can receive text messages, currently the majority of cellular network providers do not support the sending of text messages to 03 numbers. 3 different ranges of numbers were announced. Those beginning 030X are reserved for qualifying public bodies and non-profit organizations, those beginning 033X, which are available for allocation to anyone, and those beginning 034X and 037X which will be used for migration from the matching 084X and 087X number ranges respectively. Ofcom itself began using 03 numbers on November 13, 2007 for public use. Corporate and VoIP numbering, 05XxxxXXXXXXXA corporate and VoIP numbering. Unlike 03 numbers, there is no uniform pricing for 05 numbers. BT charge a number of different rates depending on the number dialed. Some are charged at geographic rate, others not. Other operators are not required to charge the same rates as BT for calling 05 numbers. Free phone numbers, 0500XXXXXXX Euro free phone services allocated before 1999. The 0500 range is used for some free phone services which were originally provided by Mercury Communications Limited. These numbers are different from the rest of the 05 range in that they are only 9 digits in length after the 0 trunk code, for example 0500070007, 0500288291, 0500600600, 0500600700, and 0500900993. Numerous universities, government departments, airlines, banks and businesses also use these numbers. They were allocated before the general trend of using longer numbers started in 1997 and long before the rest of the 05 range was assigned to corporate and VoIP numbering after 2000. In October 2012, Ofcom started a consultation proposing to remove the 0500 free phone allocation. 0800XXXXXX, 0800XXXXXXX and 0808XXXXXXX are Euro free phone services. There is one very short special number in this range, 0800-1111 for Childline. Additionally, numbers in the range 080880XXXXX are reserved for not-for-profit helplines and as such are usually free to call from most mobile telephones. A number of other numbers can also call for free from mobiles, but this varies by network. Fixed rate or special rate services, 084XXXXXXXXX and 087XXXXXXXX are Euro non-geographic fixed rate, or special rate services. With the exception of 080X free phone numbers, 08XX numbers are charged above geographic rates, with some of the extra revenue going to the terminating telco. This additional revenue may be shared with the subscriber, but is often used instead to subsidize additional network services, such as fax to email, virtual office applications, call queuing, voicemail and easy number redirection. None of these call management services is exclusive to 08XX numbers, and they could be provided on any number range. There is one very short special number in this range, 08454647 for NHS Direct. The usage of 0871, 0872 and 0873 numbers is regulated by PhonePay Plus. There is widespread confusion about the cost of calling 084 and 087 numbers. They often do not qualify for discounts and bundled minutes, and can be prohibitively expensive when called from mobiles and payphones. Many major companies persist in misdescribing them as local rate, low call, or national rate for which the Advertising Standards Authority can take action. In the future, it is likely that users of 084 and 087 numbers will have to declare the service charge element of the call cost when advertising their phone number, whilst telecoms companies will need to inform their customers about their access charge for calling each number range. Additionally, the forthcoming European Union-led Consumer Rights Directive will mean that many users of 084 and 087 numbers will no longer be allowed to use them. The directive bans the usage of numbers that cost more than calling a geographic number for customer service and complaints lines and other such purposes. Other 08XX number ranges, 08XXXXXXXXXXX are Euro Internet for schools and inbound routing codes. Premium rate content services, 09XXXXXXXXXX are Euro Premium rate content services. Numbers in the 09XX range are charged at the highest rates of any calls within the United Kingdom, and are controlled by various regulations regarding their use. The regulator is PhonePay Plus, formerly known as Xxxx, 0871, 0872, 0873 and 118 Xxx services. There are a large number of charge bands, some with high pence per minute rates, others with a high fixed price for the entire call. The earlier unused 092XXXXXXXXX, 099XXXXXXXX allocation for broadband internet services no longer exists and was removed from the number plan in 2005. Crown Dependencies, Although calls from UK landlines to landlines in the islands are charged at the same rate as those to other UK landlines, calls may be excluded from calling plans offering unlimited UK fixed line calls. Mobile operators may also charge more for calls to the islands, and these calls are usually excluded from calling plans. Calls and SMS messages sent to island mobile phone numbers are not charged at the same rate as calls to UK mobile phone numbers. Guernsey, this area code is also used for Alderney and Sark. Jersey, several Jersey companies also have non-geographic numbers allocated. Isle of Man, on the Isle of Man, both fixed and mobile phone numbers can be dialed locally in the 6-digit format. Fictitious numbers. Ofcom has also reserved certain number ranges for use in television dramas and films, so as to avoid the risk of people having their telephone numbers displayed, and receiving unwanted calls. This is similar to the use of fictitious telephone numbers in the United States and Canada with the digits 555. In most of the large cities with 3-digit area codes, a range of numbers is reserved, usually all the numbers starting with the digits 496. For fictitious numbers in other areas, the area code 01632 is reserved. This code is not in use, although 0632 was used for Newcastle upon Tyne until the late 1980s and briefly reallocated for use by premium rate services in the 1990s. There are also reserved ranges for fictitious mobile, freephone, and premium rate numbers. The Post Office even produced dial center labels for use in advertisements and film TV with a mythical exchange called Vincent plus 4 digits. The numerical equivalent of VAN was 846 and all the caller got was the speaking clock in the big city director areas. At around the same time as the other big number changes, Ofcom revised their recommendations to update the prefixes, add additional areas, and increase the size of the allocation from 10 to 1,000 numbers per block. Those changes are listed in the Big Number Change article. In Coronation Street, the fictional Manchester suburb of Weatherfield uses the unallocated range 715 Xxxx. Special service numbers, emergency services and helplines. The UK has 2 free emergency numbers, the traditional 999, which is still widely used, and the EU standard 112, which can be used in all member states of the European Union. Both 999 and 112 are used to contact all emergency services, police, fire service, ambulance service, mountain rescue, coast guard and cave rescue. Both numbers can be called from mobile phones with the clock on, or without entering the PIN where that would otherwise be required. Although some mobile phones allow emergency calls to be attempted without a SIM card, at present the UK networks reject such calls. Since November 2009, an emergency call can be made through any UK mobile network as long as there is a SIM for any valid UK network in the handset. The chargeable number 101 was introduced for non-urgent crime and community safety calls on a trial basis in 2006. In Wales, the scheme was taken forward by all 4 police forces, who adopted the number for non-emergency calls on a permanent basis in early 2009. In England the scheme was on trial until 2012, when it was adopted nationwide and the cost to call changed from 10p per call to 15p per call. The operator is obtained via 100 from landlines, while directory inquiries, formerly 192, is now provided in the 118 Xxx range, for example 118 212, 118 800, 118 500, 118 118, by different companies. International operator assistance is reached through 155. From early 2010, the pan-European 116 number range came into use for social helplines. The first 3 numbers allocated were missing people using 116,000 for a missing children helpline, the NSPCC child line on 116,111, and Samaritans using 116,123 for an emotional support helpline. A recent consultation for the numbers 116,106 and 116,117 has yet to see any result. The National Health Service can be reached on 111 for non-emergency calls. In other European countries the number 116-117 is used for a similar purpose. Two telephone helplines within the regular code space have only 7 digits, namely 08001111 for Childline and 08454647 for NHS Direct in England and Wales. Speaking clock. Since the mid-1990s, speaking clock services have been available throughout Britain using the number 123. Before this, exchanges in director areas dialed 846 and main exchanges in non-director areas originally used 952, later changing to 80 with the introduction of STD and eventually to 8081 as other recorded services were introduced on Xxxx codes. Some mobile operators allocate other services to 123 euro such as customer services or voicemail etc. Automated services and access codes. Shortcodes beginning with 1 are reserved for telecom service providers' own functionality. Some of the most well-known are codes for use with caller display, fixed-line telephone subscribers for BT, Virgin Media, Sky Talk. Sky and TalkTalk have the opportunity to use an automated messaging service which takes messages when the called number is either engaged or not answered within a given time. This can be accessed by calling 1571. For fixed-line users, it is possible to override the carrier pre-selection on a per-call basis, dialing a special code before the number, for example 1280 for BT, 1664 for lower call, or 1844 for Daisy. Ofcom defines the range for these as 124 to 140, 143 to 146, 148 to 149, 160 to 169, and 181 to 189 inclusive. Numbers of up to 5 digits used to access an indirect access provider. History. The telephone service in the United Kingdom was originally provided by private companies and local councils. But by 1912 €13 all except the telephone service of Kingston upon Hull and Guernsey had been bought out by the Post Office. The Post Office also operated telephone services in Jersey until 1923 and the Isle of Man until 1969 when the islands took over responsibility for their own postal and telephone services although the Isle of Man system remained part of British Telecom until 1987. Post Office Telecommunications was reorganised in 1980 €81 as British Telecommunications, and was the first major nationalised industry to be privatised by the Conservative government. The Hull Telephone Department was itself reconstituted as Kingston Communications, in 1987. It was sold by Hull City Council in the late 1990s and celebrated its centenary in 2004. Director System. In November 1922 the General Post Office decided to adopt the Stroger system from the various systems it had tried and it was to include directors in the exchanges in London. Demonstration models of the director exchange were shown by manufacturer ATM of Liverpool as part of the Post Office exhibits at the British Empire exhibition at Wembley in 1924 and 1925. However, it was not until 1927 that the first director telephone exchange was brought into service in Holborn, London and rolled out progressively across Greater London. A 3-digit code, represented by letters, identified the local exchange. Director schemes were gradually introduced in the other major cities of the UK Birmingham, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Liverpool and Manchester. Introduction of area codes. Subscriber trunk dialing was introduced in 1958 to allow a caller to call another telephone directly instead of via a manual telephone exchange operator. Uniform exchange codes, usually called STD codes, were allocated for every exchange in the country, progressively as STD was rolled out. This process was not completed until 1979. The original concept was for STD to be a nationwide director system, and in common with the director system, the exchange codes were originally assigned based on 2 letters of the respective place's name and the corresponding numbers on a telephone dial. For example, Aylesbury was given the STD code OAY6, where the letter A can be found on the number 2 and the letter Y on the number 9. The letter O became a 0, such as for Bournemouth, OBO2 where BO equals 20. Originally, Where a place's name began with the letter O, the code would begin with 2 zeros, such as Oxford, 00x2, where 0x equals 09. These codes starting with 00 were later reallocated, freeing the prefix 00 for use by calls to the Republic of Ireland, to radiophones and to premium rate numbers. Within a single code group area there would usually be multiple exchange buildings in various locations. The smaller exchanges might have only a few hundred lines with 3-digit subscriber numbers, for example 200 euro 499. Larger exchanges might have a few thousand lines with 4-digit subscriber numbers, for example 2000 euro 5999, or 5-digit subscriber numbers, for example 20,000 euro 49,999. Population growth over the next few decades meant there was a need for more lines. This would see an exchange with existing 3-digit numbers open one or more new ranges with 4-digit local numbers, and exchanges with existing 4-digit numbers open one or more new ranges with 5-digit local numbers. Since number ranges were being reused in each local exchange within a group, a series of shortcodes was devised to allow dialing from one local exchange to another without the need to dial the full STD code. These shortcodes usually began with a 7, 8 or 9. The code was often only 2 or 3 digits, but might be up to 5 digits long. The last digit of this shortcode would usually also feature as extra digits on the end of the main STD code in order to differentiate each satellite exchange within a group when dialing from another STD code area. In written form these area codes were split after the third digit to highlight this satellite exchange numbering. For example for 0799, Saffron Walden, as time wore on and number shortages became more acute, local numbers were gradually converted to 5-figure or 6-figure numbers, and the STD code changed to the format. In many cases the initial digits of the new local number would be formed from digits previously at the end of the old STD code. For example, Newport 5678 became Saffron Walden 825,678, nowadays 825,678. The local number would be padded with extra fixed digits to make up the new total length. For example, Clavering 345 became Saffron Walden 850,345, nowadays 850,345. In some cases the initial digits were changed. For example, Redwinter 456 became Saffron Walden 500,456, nowadays 500,456. Post-2000, only a dozen places have long STD codes with 5-digit local numbers. One area with a long STD code retains 4-digit local numbering. Long STD codes are rare. Many people are not familiar with the nowadays format, or the now discontinued format, and often omit the space in written form. Director areas. The director areas used a shorter area code, usually in the form 0x1 with a 7-digit local subscriber number. These were, the codes 071, 081, and 091 were reserved for later expansion, with the former two eventually being temporarily allocated to London. 1968 area code changes. In 1968, area codes beginning 00 were changed. Codes beginning 00 were also used for premium rate numbers or as a short code for dialing calls to various places in the Republic of Ireland over the next few decades. All-figure dialing. The use of names was intended to provide a mnemonic for the exchange in the same way as for the director system, but as more and more places were given STD codes the mnemonic link became more and more obscure, and this system became unworkable. Also, international direct dialing was being introduced, and as other countries had different assignments of letters to digits, the opportunity for confusion existed. An earlier modification to get round this problem for European dialing was the addition of the letter Q to the digit 0, which previously represented only the letter O. This was because some French exchanges had alphabetic codes including Q, but in the event France moved to all-digit codes before direct dialing from the UK was introduced. The use of alphabetic exchange codes was abandoned in the UK in 1966 in favour of all-figure numbering. As such, about 60% of current area codes are still based on the original alphabetic STD. Around 1982, The 091 code was also brought into use. Special services. Until the mid-1980s, free phone numbers could be accessed only by ringing the operator on 100 and asking to be connected, for example freephone 8963 for BT customer service. Later on, the 0800 code came into use for free phone services. These numbers often had only 7 digits, for example 0800-1111 for child line. From around 1980, calls to radio phones could also be direct dialed. 0034 a Euro Area 1, 0036 a Euro Area 2, 0037 a Euro Area 3, 0033 a Euro Area 4, 0039 a Euro Area 5, these covered only a small part of the country. The 0035 and 0038 codes were added later. In the 1980s, these other allocations were also in use, 0055 a Euro Talkabout, 0066 a Euro Super Call, 0072 a Euro Radio Paging, 0073 a Euro Radio Paging, 0077 a Euro Super Call, calls to the Republic of Ireland. Until the late 1980s, calls to major towns and cities in the Republic of Ireland could also be made using short codes starting with 000, 0001 a Euro Dublin 01 area, 0002 a Euro Cork 021 area, 0004 a Euro Dundalk 042 area, 0005 a Euro Waterford 051 area, 0006 a Euro Limerick 061 area, 0007 a Euro Letterkenny 074 area, 0009 a Euro Galway 091 area, and 0015 a Euro Sligo. This was discontinued in the late 1980s, so that all calls to the Republic of Ireland from the UK had to be dialed in the normal international format using the international access code and country code. Calls could also be made using the full international dialing code since the introduction of international direct dialing. While most of the Republic of Ireland could be direct dialed, a small number of rural areas did not have an automated telephone service until the 1980s. As a result, calls from the UK to these areas had to be made through the BT operator who connected the calls to their Irish counterpart for completion. Unlike other international calls, these were handled by the BT national operator, in the same way as UK operator calls. This service was withdrawn at noon on May 28, 1987 when the last manual exchange in Ireland, at Mountshanaon, County Clare, was switched over to an Alcatel E10 digital exchange. This completed Telecom Arian's rural digitalisation project. Although full international dialling is now used, calls from Northern Ireland landlines to landlines in the Republic are charged at UK national or local rates, and calls from Great Britain to the Republic are charged at a special Republic of Ireland rate, higher than inland rates, but lower than those for elsewhere in Western Europe. Additionally, calls to Northern Ireland from the Republic of Ireland can be made without an international access code, but instead replacing the British 028 prefix not with the conventional international prefix 004428 but with a shorter Irish 048 area code which specifically covers Northern Ireland. For example, calling Belfast from London would be 0289Xxxx, while calling Belfast from Dublin would be 0489Xxxx. However, it is also possible to make calls using the normal international 004428 Xxxx format. In both cases, calls are charged at a much lower rate than calls to Britain. In recent years, these arrangements are becoming less relevant as customers in both countries have access to a wide range of telephone service providers, cable telephony services, mobile operators and alternative services based on VoIP. Some providers include unlimited calls to the UK or Republic of Ireland in various bundled packages. This makes it very hard to generalize about call rates in 2014. Expansion of allocations for mobile, non-geographic and premium services, ELNS areas, area codes for mobile phone, local rate, premium rate and other such special numbers originally used ordinary-looking area codes in the 02Xx to 09Xx range. In the early 1980s only a few such codes were in use. Rapid expansion of these services in the late 1980s required many new codes, but there were a diminishing number of codes available for use. In order to free up space for these services, 30 geographic ABC area codes with low number use were condensed into 14 ABC ranges such that each numeric area code would cover multiple charge groups. Numbers in Barrow and Furness already used 2 and 5. Milham used the separate 0657 area code. Milham numbers were transferred to the 0229 area code. Milham numbers would begin 3 and 7 and have 6 digits. Under the new ELNS arrangement, 2 charge groups now share the same area code and the leading digit of the local number indicates which charge group the number belongs to. The new area code retains both of the old area code names. A diagram showing the principle is shown on page 9 of Ofcom's telephone numbering guide, and these areas are shown in the table below. Some ELNS areas combine 3 charge groups. Calls within the area code do not require the area code to be dialed. This is true even for calls between the charge groups. Of the 16 area codes freed up for alternative use in the 1980s, at least 11 were reused for other services. For example, the 0401 area code was reallocated to Cellnet mobile services. 5 of the area codes remained unused. In 1995, the phone day changes for geographic numbers solved the number shortage problem for mobile and non-geographic services by freeing up the whole 07, 08 and 09 range for their use from 2000 onwards. On phone day in 1995, 0229 became 01229 and 0964 became 01964, and these codes are still in use today. The remainder of the ELNS area code allocations and their history are detailed in the table below. The Cellnet Mobile 0401 allocation stayed in use for about a decade before these numbers were transferred to the 07701 range and the big number change in 2000. Nowadays all 16 of the area codes freed up in the 1980s remain unused and are available for future geographic expansion. Mixed areas, area codes for mobile phone, local rate, premium rate and other such special numbers originally used ordinary-looking area codes in the 02Xxx to 09Xxx range. In the early 1980s only a few such codes were in use. Rapid expansion of these services in the late 1980s required many new codes, but there were a diminishing number of codes available for use. In order to free up space for these services, 17 geographic ABC area codes with low number use were condensed into 6 ABC ranges under a mixed scheme. Numbers in Dumfries already used 2 and 5. Numbers in Langholm were 4 or 5 digits long and used the 0541 area code. Langholm numbers were changed to 5 digits and transferred to the newly created 03873 area code. Under the new mixed arrangement, although 0387 and 03873 shared the same ABC digits, they were treated as completely separate area codes. All calls from one area to the other require the area code to be dialed. Local numbers in Dumfries cannot begin with a 3. Of the 11 area codes freed up for alternative use in the 1980s, only 5 were actually reused for other services. For example, the 0541 area code was reallocated to C&WC area call services. 6 of the area codes remained unused. In 1995, the phone day changes for geographic numbers solved the number shortage problem for mobile and non-geographic services by freeing up the whole 07, 08 and 09 range for their use from 2000 onwards. On phone day in 1995, 0387 became 01387 and 03873 became 01373, and these codes are still in use today. The remainder of the mixed area code allocations and their history are detailed in the table below. The C&WC 0541 allocation stayed in use for more than a decade before these numbers were transferred to the 08701 range and the big number change in 2000. Nowadays all 11 of the area codes freed up in the 1980s remain unused and are available for future geographic expansion. Mixed areas in Northern Ireland. In Northern Ireland, many of the area codes were created as mixed areas. There were a number of code changes within Northern Ireland over the years, with some exchanges swapping to different area codes. In 1993, further changes were made throughout Northern Ireland in preparation for Phone Day in 1995. Many of the changes were eliminating 3-digit and 4-digit subscriber numbers in rural exchanges by adding extra digits. The table below shows the end result. The system of mixed areas remained in place. Additional codes for mobile, freephone, non-geographic, premium rate and pagers, the prefixes listed in the table below were introduced at various times from the early 1980s to the mid-1990s. The details and timeline of these allocations is complex. 0459, 0802, 0831, 0839, 0860, 0881, 0891, 0893, 0897, 0898, 0921, 0941, 0961, 0979, 0987, 0998 and 0999 had never been used for geographic area codes, so could be used for non-geographic and mobile services as soon as the need arose. Those codes, if used, have since migrated to various 07, 08 and 09 ranges in the big number change. Other codes had multiple uses over the years. Edinburgh stopped using 0500 and moved to 031. Some years later, 0500 was used for Mercury freephone services. Langholm was moved from 05415 to the new 03873 mixed area. 05415 was then reallocated as the national rate non-geographic code for C and WC area call, which then became 087015 in the big number change. Hornsey was moved from 0401 to join with the existing Patrington allocation at 0964. This created the 0964 Hornsey and Patrington ELNS area. 0401 later went on to be used for Cellnet Mobile until moving to 07701 in the big number change. Some prefixes had dual usage when no longer used for geographic area codes. In the former Basildon 0374 area code, the 03745 number block was used for national rate calls while the rest of the 0374 range was used for Vodafone mobile phones. Likewise, in the former Weardale 0956 area code, the 09567 block was used for personal numbering and the rest of 0956 was used for one-to-one mobile telephones. The area codes 0921, 0987, 0998 and 0999 were never used, the last of which due to possible confusion with the 999 emergency number. Rapid expansion of mobile and premium rate services quickly depleted the number of available area codes. By the early 1990s it was also becoming more difficult to remember the various codes that might cost a lot more to call than a local or national call, and many consumers were caught out with larger than expected bills. A more long-term solution would need to be found, as it was clear that mobile usage in particular was going to push demand for new codes even further in the coming years. Number shortage, with growth in second phone lines, direct dial-in lines, fax machines and multiple telecoms operators during the 1980s, the demand for telephone numbers exceeded the available number ranges. A number of changes were to be made to the UK numbering plan. All these stages were planned out in one exercise in the early 1980s, though the exact dates for each stage was decided later. Splitting 01 for London into 071 and 081, the first major change was in May 1990, when the London 01 area code was replaced with 071 and 081. Local numbers remained 7 digits long. Exchanges in central London used the 071 code. The remaining exchanges now used the 081 code and formed a ring around the 071 area. Although this effectively doubled the available numbers from 8 to 16 million, it was not to be the last change for the capital. This change freed up the entire 01 code range for the next step of the plan, converting all geographic area codes to 01. That operation would then free up the whole of the 02 to 09 range for a future reorganisation of some geographic and all mobile and non-geographic numbers. Most areas would see 2 code changes over the next decade, whilst London would have a total of 3. It would be a decade before this inner-outer London split was eventually nullified. Consumers were already becoming confused as to what they would be charged for any particular call, with for example Xxxx being a call to Honiton in Devon and Xxxx being a much more expensive call to a mobile phone. The situation in the early 1990s was as follows: your next few changes would fix these problems. Initial allocations with 10 digits, freephone 0800 numbers, The longest telephone numbers in use until now had been 9 digits long, for example 051, 234, 5678, 0303 456789, 03873 56789, 0800 445566. The long-term plan is for migration to 10-digit numbering in the UK, and in 1991 this started with new 0800 numbers being allocated with 10 digits. Ofcom administers number allocation from 1994, with multiple operators joining the market. Administration was passed to an independent regulator. Ofcom took over administration of the ECAR Euro unregistered trademark S telephone numbers from BT in 1994. Phone Day. Geographic numbers. On Phone Day, April 16, 1995, the digit 1 was inserted into all UK geographic area codes, including those in the director, all-figure dialing, ELNS and mixed areas. Under the new changes, for example, Inner London's 071 became 0171. Outer London's 081 became 0181. A small selection of the codes that changed are shown in the table below. This was done with a view to reorganizing the numbering plan at a later date, so that the first 2 digits would indicate the type of service called. 5 new area codes were introduced for cities that were running low on phone numbers per euro, and a digit was appended to each existing local number. Most of the initial local number ranges created by Phone Day were exhausted within just a few years. New local numbers then began to be allocated with a different initial digit. For example, in Sheffield, when the 2 Xxxx numbers were exhausted, new numbers then began to be issued from the 3 Xxxx range. Similarly, newly allocated numbers in Leeds, Leicester and Bristol also came from the 3 Xxxx range, but in Nottingham, the new numbers instead came from the 8 Xxxx range. Less than a decade later, further new ranges were opened in most of these areas, but this time New Reading and Leicester numbers are in the 4 Xxxx range, New Bristol numbers are in the 2 Xxxx range, New Nottingham numbers are in the 7 Xxxx range, and New Leeds numbers are in the 4 Xxxx and 8 Xxxx ranges. Since then, other ranges have been opened in these areas. See table above for further details. National dialing-only numbers. International calls from the UK. The International Access Code also changed on Phone Day, from 010 to 00, thus meeting the International Call Prefix standard set by the International Telecommunications Union. 112 emergency number in addition to 999. In 1995, the United Kingdom adopted the Pan-European 112 emergency services number. This new number runs alongside the existing 999 number, first introduced in 1937. Changes between Phone Day and the big number change. Geographic numbers. Reading numbers endured 2 changes in a very short time. Phone Day, on April 16, 1995, changed the area code from 0734 to 01734, and then almost a year later, on April 8, 1996, it changed again to. At that time, local numbers were changed from 6 to 7 digits by inserting a 9 in front of the old local number. Parallel running of the old numbering was withdrawn on January 9, 1998. National dialing-only numbers. Around this time, some new number ranges were already being allocated and used for mobile phone numbers. These new ranges already fitted into the new numbering scheme of 07XxxxXXXXXXX. The rest of the older mobile phone numbers, those already in use for many years, would be brought into this 07X numbering scheme a few years later, both by changing the code to the 07X range, and by adding an additional digit. New personal numbers with revenue share start using 070. In 1995, the 070 prefix began to be allocated for personal numbers. These new numbers had 10 digits. New numbers at 070-107XXXXX were held aside in order for FLEXTEL personal numbers at 09567XXXXX to migrate in the forthcoming big number change in 2000. The geographic area codes 0700 to 0709 had only recently been moved to 01700 to 01709 on phone day. New 070 personal number allocations had to be chosen carefully such that misdialed calls for old pre-phone day geographic numbers would fail to connect rather than connect the caller to a user of a new personal number. Ofcom identified old Xxx geographic number ranges that had not been used before and reallocated those first. For example, the Welwyn Garden City 4X range had never been used, so 07074 Xxx quickly came into use for personal numbering in 1996. However, the 3X range had been in use within Welwyn Garden City, and these numbers remained protected by Ofcom for a number of years. The 07073 Xxx range of numbers finally came into use for personal numbering in 2007. 070 numbers initially allowed revenue share. These numbers are easy to mistake for mobile phone numbers and many scams developed. Ofcom consulted on various proposals. Eventually revenue share was banned on these lines and they also fell under the jurisdiction of Xxxx, the premium rate services regulator. New mobile numbers start using 077Xx, 078Xx, 079Xx. Geographic numbers had been moved to begin 01 in the phone day changes in 1995. Pre-existing mobile phone, non-geographic, premium rate and pager services continued to use the same 9-digit 02XXXXXXXXX to 09XXXXXXXX numbers as before. It would be several more years before these would add a digit to become 10-digit numbers and move to the 07, 08 and 09 ranges in the big number change in 2000 to 2001. From May 1997, new mobile phone services started using numbers beginning 077, 078 or 079 reusing area codes recently vacated by 9-digit geographic numbers. These new mobile numbers have 10 digits. BT Cellnet started with 07801XXXXXX, 07803XXXXXX, 07808XXXXXX and 07809XXXXXX. Vodafone started with 07771XXXXXX and 07775XXXXXX in May 1997. 121 started using 07804XXXXXX and 07806XXXXXX numbers in May 1995. 07XXX codes for new allocations by operators have been issued by Ofcom since May 1997. It would be another few years before older BT Cellnet 0802XXXXXX numbers were converted to 07802XXXXXX, Vodafone 0370XXXXXX numbers were converted to 07770XXXXXX and 1210961XXXXXX numbers were converted to 07961XXXXXX and the big number change. New pager numbers start using 076, pre-existing pager numbers were already scattered under various codes in the 02XX to 09XX range and had 9 digits. Several services used non-standard 01 numbers. These would all eventually be moved to 076 codes and to 10 digits in the big number change in 2000. From 1998 onwards, new pager numbers began to be issued in parts of the 076 range. These new numbers had 10 digits. Various parts of the 076 range were set aside for pager number migration in the forthcoming big number change in 2000. The number range 07624XXXXXX was set aside for mobile telephones in the Isle of Man. This would also come into use as a part of the big number change. 08 Consumer Protection. The initial plan for the new 08 number range was such that rates charged to people calling an 08 telephone number would be made more clear by linking the cost of the call to the second digit of the national significant number. Numbers starting 080 would be free, while 082 would be cheaper than 089. New free phone numbers start using 0808. In 1997, Ofcom released 10-digit numbers beginning 0808 designated as free phone services. These calls are free only from a landline or public payphone. Both BT and Mercury issued only 10-digit free phone numbers to users after 1997. With the market opened up to competition, many other companies also allocated these numbers to users. Usage of pre-existing 10 and 9-digit 0800 numbers and pre-existing 9-digit 0500 numbers continued as before. Additionally, numbers in the range 080880Xxxx are reserved for not-for-profit helplines and as such are usually free to call from most mobile telephones. A number of other numbers can also call for free from mobiles, but this varies by network. New non-geographic revenue share numbers start using 0845 and 0870, from 1996 onwards, off the board various new 10-digit non-geographic 0845 and 0870 numbers into use. Only certain subparts of each code were made available for immediate use. Numbers at 08457, 08459, 08701, 08704, 08705 and other ranges were set aside for numbers such as 0345, 0374, 0541, 0645 and 0990 that would be migrating from 9 digits to 10 digits and to these 208 Xxx codes in the forthcoming big number change in 2000. In these early days, the price for calling 0845 numbers from landlines was tied to BT's price for calls to local geographic numbers. Similarly, the price for calling 0870 numbers from landlines was tied to BT's price for national calls to geographic numbers. NHS Direct, the short number 0845-1888 was set aside in March 1998 for trials of the new NHS Direct service with calls charged at the local rate. At a later date, the number was changed to 0845-4647. Warnings from Ofcom. After the migration of geographic 0xxx area codes to new 01xxx codes on phone day, some of the old area codes had started to be reused for other purposes. For example, 0870 had been moved to 01870 and now 0870 started to be reused for non-geographic services. Ofcom had to issue a warning to operators to remove this number has changed. Please redial inserting a 1 after the initial 0 messages that had been applied on phone days so that callers could get through to the new non-geographic numbers. Premium rate and mobile problems. With the diverse usage and pricing of similar-looking codes, there could easily be a nasty shock when the bill arrived. Office phone systems could be set to block various premium rate prefixes, but it was important to regularly review and update the list. For those that did not, problems accessing some numbers were beginning to develop. The 0930 code was mainly used for premium rate services, but 09307XXXXX was used by 121 for mobile telephone services. Some people found that calls to all 0930 numbers were barred and hence also those mobile phones. To overcome this, the 09617XXXXX range was mirrored onto 09307XXXXX. These were all 9-digit numbers. New premium rate services start using 090X. From 1998 onwards, 090X numbers with 10 digits started coming into use for premium rate services. As with 084 and 087 numbers, certain small number blocks within the 090X range were set aside for migration of old premium rate codes in the forthcoming big number change. The 09 number range was originally subdivided as follows. From August 23, 1999, Ofcom added the 0905 range as by then 0906 was almost fully allocated. Internet for Schools, announced in November 1997 and issued from February 1998 onwards, the 0820 range was designated Internet for Schools. Number conservation. As the number of lines in use continued to grow, some areas became close to full capacity. In the late 1990s, Ofcom signalled a number of areas of concern. Of these, only Coventry was immediately addressed, by migration to the 024 code and 8-digit subscriber numbers in the big number change in 2000. Broadband Services, the 092X to 099X range was designated Broadband Services. The allocation was never used and eventually removed from the plan in 2005. Local dialing short codes, calls between nearby exchanges could previously be dialed using a short code, often beginning 7, 8 or 9. With rising demand for more subscriber numbers, these codes were scrapped in the late 1990s. After a short delay, 6-digit subscriber numbers beginning 7 or 8 began to be issued in these 01Xxx areas, and with 5 digits in 01Xxx areas. In the mid and late -2000s, some of these areas also started issuing subscriber numbers beginning 9. Big number change. Geographic numbers. On April 22, 2000, the second phase of the plan came into operation, dubbed the Big Number Change. With 02X area codes freed up by the previous reorganization, they could be reused. These areas had already had a code change 5 years earlier as a part of Phone Day. The Big Number Change altered the area codes again, as well as making the local number 2 digits longer. Although Southampton and Portsmouth are one code from a code structure and local dialing point of view, calls between them are not treated as local calls for pricing purposes. It is planned that the new codes will eventually cover a larger area than at present. For example, although currently covers just the Cardiff area, it may in the future cover all of Wales. The code for Northern Ireland is. The transition codes for Northern Ireland are shown below. These can be accessed from the Republic of Ireland using either the domestic code 048, or the international prefix 004428. The prefixes for existing numbers in Northern Ireland are split up into 7 groups, roughly based upon the county in which the main exchange is based. The initial digit of each phone number is based on the designated county euro. For example, the first county alphabetically is County Antrim, so numbers in this county start with 2. The next county is County Armagh, so numbers here start with 3. One exception to this is the Greater Belfast area, initial digit 9, which is extended to include each adjacent former STD code area, including the towns of Bangor, Lisburn, Carrickfigures, Antrim and Saintfield. The encompassed former STD codes at some points extend to over 20 miles from Belfast itself. There is a much more complete list in the Big Number Change article. National dialing-only numbers, non-geographic, and mobile and pager numbers. In addition, mobile and pager numbers were all moved into the 07Xxx range. Pagers moved into 076Xx, while personal numbers moved to 070. Mobile phone numbers moved into the 077Xx, 078Xx and 079Xx ranges. The exception to this was Manx Telecom mobile phone numbers, where the code became 07624 in order to match the 01624 used for landlines. In addition, lower and higher rate non-geographic numbers migrated to 08Xx and premium rate numbers migrated to 09Xx. A summary of the migration path for the existing mobile and pager codes, as they were at the time, is shown below. 020 for London. The number change meant that London returned to a single area code again, with no inner-outer split. Existing London numbers acquired the prefixes 7 or 8, but from that point on 7Xxxxxxxx and 8Xxxxxxxx numbers were assigned or reused anywhere in the London area covered by the single 020 code. From June 2005 the regulator, Ofcom, ceased to allocate new number blocks to suppliers in the 7Xxxxxxxxx and 8Xxxxxxxx ranges. From this date onwards all number allocations were in the 3Xxxxxxxx range and can be used anywhere in the London 020 area. Although new blocks of 7Xxxxxxxx and 8Xxxxxxx range numbers are no longer being allocated to suppliers, those that have not yet exhausted their existing blocks are able to continue to issue and reissue them to their customers. Numbers in the 0200Xxxxxxxx and 0201Xxxxxxx number ranges have also been made available. However, these numbers cannot be dialed without the 020 code and are called national dialing-only numbers. A small number of these blocks are used by numbers migrated from old 0171-0Xxxxxxx, 0171-1XXXXXX, 0181-0XXXXXX, and 0181-1XXXXXX national dialing-only numbers. They are mainly used as termination points for non-geographic numbers, and for various alarm and other automated systems where the actual telephone number itself is never called. It is a common misconception that London still has more than one area code. This is incorrect in the sense that omitting the 0207 or 0208 code will give a local number that cannot be connected as it is missing the first digit. Therefore, writing a London number as 020XXXXXXXX is incorrect and can lead to confusion when attempting to dial it. Misconceptions. The misconception of area code and number separation is also seen in other areas of the country where the area code length was reduced and the big number change, such as Coventry being written as 02476XXXXXX, whereas the correct number sequence is 76XXXXXXX, 77XXXXXX and 75XXXXXX numbers, and Cardiff being written as 02920XXXXXX, whereas the correct number sequence is 20XXXXXX, 21XXXXXX and 22XXXXXX numbers. Likewise in Portsmouth, numbers are being incorrectly written as 02392XXXXXX, whereas the correct number sequence is 92XXXXXX, 93XXXXXX numbers. This also occurs in some areas of Northern Ireland that previously had 5-digit and 6-digit local numbers, like in Banbridge XXXXXX, where numbers are still erroneously written as 028406XXXXX instead of 406XXXXX. Locals still misquote the area code as 028406, even now, some 12 years after the change. The same occurs in formerly 6-digit code areas, such as Lisburn XXXXXX, continues to frequently appear as 02892XXXXXX instead of the correct form 92XXXXXX. This is also seen in the earlier phone day areas, such as in Sheffield, for 2XXXXXX numbers, where these are often seen written as 01142XXXXXX or are missing the leading digit 2 when abbreviated. This is a particular problem now that 3XXXXXX local numbers are being issued. It also affects Reading numbers where these are still being written as 01189XXXXXX, whereas the correct number sequence is 9XXXXXX. Now that Reading has some 3XXXXXX and 4XXXXXX numbers, misdialing also occurs when people prefix 3XXXXXX and 4XXXXXX numbers with 01189 instead of just 0118. In all of these areas, the result of the confusion is that callers are adding an incorrect area code to numbers allocated within the new local number ranges, and that then results in a misdialed call. Recent changes, 1997 to present day, new allocations within existing 011X areas, these are detailed as extra entries within the phone day section above. 2000 introduction of 055 corporate numbers, in 2000, Ofcom started allocating 055 numbers for corporate numbering. These numbers have 10 digits. Uptake of these numbers has been low. 055-114XXXXX numbers have been used for the BT Broadband voice service since December 2003, one of their bigger customers being Abbey Bank. 2000 introduction of 0844 and 0871 non-geographic revenue share numbers, in 2000, Ofcom started allocating non-geographic 0844 and 0871 revenue share numbers. These numbers have 10 digits. Initially, uptake of these numbers was low, but increased dramatically from 2005 onwards. These numbers look similar to 0845 and 0870 numbers but are often charged at a different rate. From their inception until around 2005, call costs from landlines looked like this: €080 no charge to caller, 0844 euro up to 5p min from BT landlines, set by terminating operator, 0845 euro originating landline operators local rate, 0870 euro originating landline operators national rate, 0871 euro up to 10p min from BT landlines, set by terminating operator. The call price for 0844 and 0871 numbers from a BT landline is the revenue share premium and no additional markup, by regulation. From landlines other than BT, the call price for 0844 and 0871 numbers is usually higher than from BT landlines as those other operators add their own unregulated markup on top of the revenue share. From mobiles, 080 numbers cost from 10 to 30 pence per minute and calls to 084 and 087 numbers cost up to 50 pence per minute at that time. The revenue share is only a small proportion of the cost billed to callers when using a mobile. After 2005, most landline providers no longer differentiated between local and national calls, charging a single geographic rate for calling 01 and 02 numbers nationwide. Many landline providers also started offering inclusive call bundles for 01 and 02 numbers, and by 2011 the vast majority of landline phone users were on this type of deal. Bundled minutes from mobiles include 01, 02 and 07 numbers. Bundles effectively make all calls to 01 and 02 numbers free for very many people. Since 2005, it has been illegal to describe 084 numbers as local rate, or low call, or 087 numbers as national rate. A small number of landline providers and a smaller number of mobile providers have allowed 0870 numbers to be used in inclusive minutes bundles. However, 0844 and 0871 numbers are never inclusive. From landlines, 084 and 087 numbers cost anything up to 20 pence per minute. From mobile phones, 084 and 087 numbers cost anything up to 45 pence per minute. The price includes a revenue share premium, or service charge of up to 5 pence per minute for 0844 numbers and up to 10 pence per minute for 0871 numbers. The premium is passed on to the terminating telecoms company. Due to persistent abuse of 0871 numbers, these have been under the remit of PhonePay Plus since 2009. Indiana, 2013/2014, the Consumer Rights Directive will make 084, 087 and other numbers charged at above geographic rate illegal to use for customer service and complaints lines. 2001 Introduction of 091X premium rate numbers. In 2001, additional premium rate numbers in the 091X range started to be allocated. Initially just 0911, but latterly also 0912 and 0913. 09 numbers were regulated first by Xxxx and then after 2007 by PhonePay Plus. 2002 Introduction of 118 Xxx numbers to replace 192 directory inquiries. Until 2002, the domestic directory inquiries service within the UK had been reached by dialing 192 from a landline. The service had been run solely by BT. In December 2002, the market was opened up by Ofcom for new providers to run additional directory inquiries services in competition. BT's 192 service moved to 118,500, and dialing 192 ceased working in August 2003. New providers used 118,118, 118,247, 118,855 and many others. Nowadays there are more than 100 such providers and more than 130 different tariffs. As with 09Xxx premium rate numbers, the usage of 118 Xxx directory inquiry numbers was regulated by Xxxx. 2003 New 0908 numbers for adult services. In 2003, the 0908 number range came into use, as 0909 was now almost fully allocated. 2003 area name changes. In 2003, Ofcom published a proposal to create a national telephone numbering plan. This draft plan proposed changing the names of many areas from whatever name BT had previously used. Following responses from BT, C&W and others, the final plan was published with a number of amendments incorporated, followed by a minor revision a few weeks later. A few months later, The data and the responsibility for maintaining it was passed to Ofcom. Ofcom's data is contained in two files, the NTNP PDF file and the SABC CSV file for electronic download. Although the data in these files should be identical, there have been and still are very many differences between them. In one background document from 2004, Ofcom states that in order to conform to the National Telephone Numbering Plan, the names of the following geographic area codes have changed: 1248, 1268, 1275, 1276, 1291, 1293, 1306, 1322, 1327, 1334, 1344, 1354, 1356, 1375, 1384, 1394, 1425, 1438, 1442, 1451, 1454, 1461, 1470, 1471, 1477, 1478, 1485, 1488, 1489, 1491, 1543, 1561, 1562, 1582, 1588, 1598, 1661, 1668, 1675, 1680, 1681, 1684, 1688, 1689, 1695, 1707, 1720, 1727, 1737, 1744, 1753, 1770, 1784, 1806, 1821, 1856, 1870, 1877, 1883, 1885, 1889, 1895, 1908, 1920, 1922, 1926, 1928, 1932, 1952, 1953, 1963, 1980, 1983, 1984, 1992. However, several of the above area codes did not see any name change. It had been proposed to change some names, but in the end either the original BT name continued to be used or a completely new name suggested by either BT or C&W, or by both, was adopted. The Ofcom proposal also contained a large number of spelling mistakes in the proposed area code names. Some of those errors were rectified within weeks or months, while others have still not been fixed 8 years later. Additionally, several other areas changed their name after suggestions by BT and/or C&W, although Ofcom originally had no plans to change them. There are also several areas which changed name but are not listed above. Additionally, some names were changed in one Ofcom document but were not updated in the other Ofcom document until several years later. Some have still not been updated or corrected. 9 more place names were fixed in a reissued NTNP PDF document in mid-December 2011. 2003 responsibility for UK telecommunications passed from Ofcom to Ofcom. In 2003, the Office of Telecommunications was disbanded and replaced with the Office of Communications. 2004 additional number ranges within existing ELNS areas. In 2004, Ofcom allocated the remaining number ranges within the 14 existing ELNS areas. 2004 additional number ranges within existing mixed areas. In 2004, Ofcom allocated the remaining number ranges within the existing 18 mixed areas. 2004 introduction of 056 VoIP numbers. In 2004, Ofcom started allocating 056 numbers for VoIP services. Soon after, VoIP services also appeared on geographic 01 and 02 numbers. Uptake of 056 numbers remains low. These numbers have 10 digits. 2005 to present day, new allocations within existing 02X areas. These are detailed as extra entries within the big number change section above. 2005 removal of unused 09Xxx broadband services from number plan. Some years earlier, 092X to 099X had been designated broadband services. With changes in technology, this allocation had never been used. It was removed from the plan in 2005. 2005 adult premium rate services began using 098X numbers. with calls for premium rate adult services to be more clearly defined and separated from other premium rate services. The 0908 and 0909 codes were to be no longer issued for new services. Instead, the new 098X range would be used, initially 0982 but latterly also 0983, 0984 and 0989. Some companies had attempted to avoid restrictions placed on premium rate services by instead running adult services on various 070, 0871 and other number ranges. Regulations were eventually drafted to force these services to use only the designated 098X numbers. 2005 NHS banned from using 0870 and 09Xxx numbers, due to concerns raised by patients having to pay unfair costs when calling NHS services by telephone. The usage of 0870 non-geographic numbers was banned by the Department of Health in 2005. At that time, 0870 numbers often cost more to call than geographic 01 and 02 numbers and were not usually included in bundled minutes. Around 400 GP surgeries used 0870 numbers and were also coming under greater scrutiny, with a few reverting to geographic numbers. Many of these services quickly moved to 0845 or 0844 revenue share numbers, as they were not specifically banned, even though they also cost more to call than 01 and 02 numbers and in many cases cost more to call than 0870 numbers. The tendency to unlawfully refer to 084X numbers as local rate or low-call numbers hid the true cost of calling them, compared to the price for calling geographic numbers. One supplier of surgery telephone systems opted to use 0844 revenue share numbers, paying the surgery 2p min from the 5p min premium paid by callers. Contravening ASA advice, surgeries were told that 0844 numbers were low-call numbers, and subsequent tariff comparisons ignored both packages with inclusive minutes and users with mobile phones. In December 2006, Lord Norman Warner sent a letter to all primary care trust chief executives drawing attention to the Central Office of Information Guidance on telephone numbering, which suggested that healthcare providers consider adopting an 03 telephone number so that people do not have to pay over the odds to contact their local services. Very few took notice. In July and November 2007, two early day motions were signed by numerous MPs calling for GPs to no longer use 0844 and other such expensive telephone numbers. In recent years, there has been much discussion in the media about the use of 0844 numbers in the healthcare sector, mainly due to the costs incurred by people who have to dial these numbers as the primary form of contact with their local healthcare services, especially when calling from mobiles. The issue was debated in Parliament in early 2008. The BMA recommended that GPs publish call costs for 0844 numbers in surgeries. Former Health Secretary Alan Johnson has publicly advocated the use of 03 numbers. By early 2008 there were already more than 800 GPs in England using 0844 telephone numbers. The Department of Health started investigating the use of 084 numbers in the NHS in March 2008. Phone supplier NEG stated their belief that 0844 numbers would not be banned. In 2008, Leicester City NHS Trust looked into their usage of telephone numbers and revealed a complex set of issues to be solved, some of which were fixed later in the year. Enfield Primary Care Trust wrote to all 62 surgeries in the borough warning them that it does not approve of them using premium rate 0844 numbers. It was revealed that Mid Yorkshire Hospital Trust had made more than £80,000 from use of an 0844 telephone number in 2 years. By late 2008, the number of GP surgeries using 084 numbers had risen to 1,500. The Department of Health published a consultation at the end of 2008 calling for views on the usage of 084 numbers in the NHS, which received more than 3,000 responses. In response, the British Medical Association stated GP practices using 084 telephone numbers must be allowed to serve out the terms of their contracts with telephone suppliers if the government decides to ban them from the NHS, as many had already mistakenly signed up to long contracts for 0844 numbers. Ofcom recommended the 03 option. In 2009, Heart of Birmingham Primary Care Trust moved 22 GPs to new 0345 numbers. Although 0870 numbers were banned in 2005, Even as late as 2010 there were NHS bodies only now just getting around to complying with that ban. 2006 ASA start taking action against misleading price indications for 084 and 087 numbers. In 2006, the Advertising Standards Authority started taking action against companies that falsely represent that 084 numbers are local rate, SIC or low call, SIC calls, or 087 numbers are national rate, SIC calls. By this time, most operators no longer offered a local call rate, instead charging all calls to 01 and 02 numbers at the same rate, whatever the distance. After 2005, several operators also offered 01, 02 and the newly created 03 numbers as free minutes within an evening and weekend calls bundle or within an anytime calls bundle. As 084 and 087 numbers were not usually included in any such bundle, costing up to 20p min from landlines and up to 41p min from mobiles. Describing these numbers as anything other than chargeable with an additional service charge is a misleading price indication. In comparison, for many callers, calls to 01, 02 and 03 numbers had effectively become free. 2006 new 075 Xxx mobile numbers introduced, as a result of ever-increasing mobile phone ownership, and especially the introduction of mobile broadband in the UK. The 075 Xxx number range was opened in October 2006. This joined the existing 07624, 077Xx, 078Xx and 079Xx ranges. 2006 introduction of 101 for non-emergency calls to the police. In 2006, the new 101 number for non-emergency calls to the police began trials in several areas with a call cost of 10 pence per call. The number was adopted nationally in 2011/2012. Calls now cost 15 pence per call from landlines and mobiles. 2007 introduction of 03 non-geographic numbers. In February 2007, Ofcom announced the 03 range of numbers was being brought into use and the first numbers were issued in May. Although allocated as non-geographic, these were to be charged at the same rate as geographic 01 and 02 numbers from both landline and mobile and were also to be included within free minutes bundles for subscribers with a call package. Further details are in the 03 numbers section above. 2007 new 0843 and 0872 non-geographic revenue share numbers. In May 2007, Ofcom allocated the first 0872 numbers. These follow on from the earlier 0871 code which was now fully allocated. In November 2007, the first 0843 numbers were allocated. These follow on from the earlier, and now fully allocated, 0844 code. These are used for revenue share services and are generally not included in bundled minutes from either mobiles or landlines. From landlines these numbers cost anything up to 20 pence per minute and from mobile phones anything up to 45 pence per minute. The price includes a revenue share premium, or service charge of up to 5 pence per minute for 0843 numbers and up to 10 pence per minute for 0872 numbers. The premium is passed on to the terminating telecoms company. Ofcom also indicated that 0842 and 0873 will follow on from these allocations at a later date. Due to continued misuse of the 0871 and 0872 number ranges, Xxxx consulted on additional regulation in 2006 and announced in 2007 that both number ranges were to be regulated from 2008. After some delay they were eventually taken into the jurisdiction of PhonePay Plus in 2009. PhonePay Plus replaced Xxxx in 2007. 2008 new area code, 01987 Ebbsfleet. In 2008, a new area code was created for Ebbsfleet. Adjacent area codes no longer had enough projected spare capacity for the new development to use, so 01987 was allocated. 2009 reform of 070 personal numbering. Ofcom had previously considered that personal numbers should migrate to 06, to replace the 070 prefix that is sometimes confused with mobile phone numbers. There is no cap on retail caller charges. Ofcom wanted 070 and 06 numbers to have a price cap, and 07 numbers to be used exclusively for mobile phones. Companies such as Hospedia use 070 personal numbers. After an in-depth study to better understand the market, Ofcom has changed its mind and is now proposing to drop the Xxxx migration concept and decided that the forced migration to Xxxx is no longer seen to be objectively justifiable. Premium rate and other such services were also banned from using 070 numbers. 2009 introduction of 116 Xxx numbers. In 2009, Ofcom introduced the first harmonized European numbers for harmonized services of social value, and additional numbers were allocated in 2010. 2009 new 074 Xxx mobile numbers introduced. As a result of ever-increasing mobile phone and mobile broadband ownership, the 074 Xxx number range was opened in July 2009. This joined the existing 075 Xxx, 07624, 077 Xxx, 078 Xxx and 079 Xxx ranges. 2009 revenue share no longer allowed on 0870 non-geographic numbers. After a sustained period of abuse, revenue share was removed from 0870 and 070 numbers. Prices for calling 0870 numbers from landlines fell and some landline providers started to allow calls to 0870 numbers to appear within call plan inclusive minutes. Revenue share continued on 0843, 0844, 0845, 0871 and 0872 numbers. It was anticipated that 0845 numbers would also lose their revenue share, leading BT to prematurely include these numbers within call plans. Ofcom changed their mind and the status of 0845 numbers wasn't changed. Instead, in 2010 to 2012, Ofcom eventually consulted on reorganization of the whole of the 084 and 087 number ranges. 2009 PhonePay Plus begins regulation of 0871 and 0872 numbers. After Xxxx consultation in 2006 and 2007 numbers beginning 0871 began to be regulated by PhonePay Plus, the premium rate services regulator from August 1, 2009. This brings regulation in line with existing 09 Xxx premium rate services, 070 personal numbers and 118 Xxx directory inquiries. Xxxx became PhonePay Plus on October 15, 2007. 0871 and 0872 numbers retain their revenue share status. 2010 GPs banned from using 0844 numbers. It had been widely reported in 2009 that 084 numbers were to be banned from the NHS. In December 2009, the Department of Health published directions to NHS bodies concerning the cost of telephone calls made by patients to the NHS. An NHS body must not enter into, renew or extend a contract or other arrangement for telephone services unless it is satisfied that, having regard to the arrangement as a whole, persons will not pay more to make relevant calls to the NHS body than they would to make equivalent calls to a geographic number. This reiterated the free at the point of delivery principle of the NHS and the direction applied to all NHS bodies. The accompanying letter introduced ambiguity. These directions do not prohibit an organisation from using specific number ranges for the purpose of contacting NHS services. Organisations remain free to use non-geographical number ranges such as 084, providing that patients are not charged more than the equivalent cost of calling a geographical number to do so. Simple inspection of the call price lists for all major landline and mobile telephone service providers readily confirmed that 0844 numbers always cost more than 01 and 02 numbers. From this, it is clear that only 01, 02 and 03 numbers can be used by NHS bodies. 0844 numbers continued to be adopted by GPs, with an estimated 200 more signing up in the final 6 months of 2009. The GP Committee of the BMA advised that NEG had assured both the BMA and the Department of Health that 0844 numbers were local rate calls charged at rates less than geographic calls, and that GPs could continue using them as long as each GP obtained that assurance from NEG. However, NEG does not have any patients as customers, nor does NEG set the prices for calls that patients make, nor does it send out bills to patients, so any such assurance is worthless. Patients are billed by BT, Sky, Virgin, Vodafone, O2, Orange, T-Mobile, and others, and all of those charge more for calling 0844 numbers than for calling 01, 02 and 03 numbers. With widespread abuse of non-geographic numbers continuing unabated, Ofcom started a long series of consultations in April 2010. Also in April 2010, the Department of Health introduced new GMS contracts so that GPs would now also be covered by the earlier direction. From this point on, the more than 6,500 GP surgeries in England and Wales were banned from using phone numbers that cost more than calling a geographic number, and given 1 year to comply. The GMS contract variation was needed as GPs are not NHS bodies, rather independent contractors. Questions were asked in the Scottish Parliament in June 2010. In a move out of step with other changes, plans for the existing NHS Direct 0845 46 47 number to migrate to a cheaper-to-call 03 number were scrapped as plans for a new 111 service were already well advanced. A year after the GMS contract variation came into effect, many GPs were continuing to use 0844 numbers in defiance of the ban. In March and May 2011, more than 1,300 GP surgeries were still using the banned 0844 numbers. It was becoming clear that local decision-makers had failed to understand the 0844 revenue share mechanism as well as the price regulations that apply uniquely to BT and make their call rates atypical when compared to other providers. At least one PCT claimed that they did not know what patients were paying for calls and further claimed that they had no way of finding out, seemingly unaware that every telecoms supplier publishes a detailed price list on their respective websites. NEG continued to issue a revised version of their letter of compliance, assuring GPs that calling 0844 numbers does not cost more than calling 01 and 02 numbers, and in May 2011 issued a much longer document in response to earlier Daily Mail articles that had exposed the differences between the position taken by NEG and the actual provisions laid out in the April 2010 GMS contract variation. In July 2011, the BMA advocated that GPs should only consider the call costs for patients calling from BT landlines using tariffs without inclusive call allowances. The BMA advised that GPs should not consider the price of calls for patients calling from landlines other than BT, nor those with inclusive allowances or using mobile phones. This advice directly contradicted the statement recently made in Parliament: "It is absolutely clear that there is no distinction between landlines, mobiles or payphones. The directions are very clear that patients should not expect to be charged any more." PCTs, en masse, had seemingly misunderstood the regulations or had been misled by the incorrect advice spread by NEG and the BMA, as by November 2011 more than 1,400 GPs were using the banned numbers. Protests against the use of 0844 numbers were growing. There are even cases of GPs changing to 0844 numbers a year after the ban started. Only a small number of GPs had complied with the ban. Various GPs using 0844 numbers attempted to justify their position based on demonstrably false information. In some areas, patients took it upon themselves to find unpublished geographic numbers for GPs continuing to flout the 0844 ban. In January 2012, a parliamentary debate took place where it was confirmed that users should not pay more than a geographic rate call, and it was clarified that this applies to both landlines and mobiles. Additionally, bundled, or free minutes should also count. The reference provides some additional commentary on the major points. A month later, the Department of Health issued further guidance on the use of 084 numbers in the NHS, confirming that GPs should consider all means of telephoning the practice including from payphones, mobile phones and landlines, which the BMA disputed. 0844 numbers were mentioned again in a parliamentary debate in March 2012 when the Secretary of State Andrew Lansley confirmed, "We have made it very clear that GPs should not be using 0844 numbers for that purpose and charging patients for them." A small number of surgeries have since complied with the regulation by moving to 01 or 02 numbers, but most have not done so. In 2012, NEG issued several revised documents claiming compliance using non-typical tariffs as a basis for comparison and ignoring bundled minutes, and again in 2013. The Northern Ireland Assembly debated the issue in May 2012, where it was disclosed that 23 of Northern Ireland's 355 GP surgeries use an 0844 number. a briefing note was produced within, and for the usage of, UK government. This covered some of the history relating to the issue. Campaigners had already produced a simplified timeline. In their response to an ongoing Ofcom consultation on simplifying non-geographic numbers, NEG said under the proposed new structure, Ofcom expects call cost descriptions to follow the format: this call will cost you X pence per minute plus your phone company's access charge. We do not believe that it is appropriate for a patient to receive the service charge information advised by Ofcom when they contact their surgery, as this will only seek to alarm them, and perpetuate the myth that all calls are more costly. In order to comply, GPs should be using numbers that begin 01, 02 or 03 and should not be using numbers that begin 070, 084, 087 or 09. The 034 and 037 ranges are reserved specifically for 084 and 087 migration. GPs using 084 and 087 numbers can migrate to the equivalent 034 or 037 version of their number without ending their phone service contracts. Alternatively, they can move to brand new 030 or 033 numbers or to a geographic 01 or 02 number. Only a few GPs and NHS services have chosen 03 numbers, even though this should be the most obvious solution, since 03 numbers allow the same call queuing and call management facilities as 084 and 087 numbers while costing the same as 01 and 02 numbers for all callers. In spite of the ban on 0844 numbers in the NHS since April 2010, more GPs continue to sign up to use them. However, PhonePay Plus has also taken an interest in extending regulations that already cover 09 and 087 numbers as used for premium rate chat lines, competitions and phone-in voting systems to also cover 084 numbers. Multiple PCTs have failed to enforce the terms of the April 2010 variations to the GMS contract, and many GPs continue to use the banned numbers. At least one surgery with an 0844 contract and with considerable remaining time before it ends has adopted Skype as an alternative method of contacting the surgery. Some surgeries have two telephone numbers, one a premium rate 0844 number with a higher level of service and the other a standard geographic 01 or 02 number with a lower level of service, thereby creating a 2-2 system for accessing the NHS services. Almost 3 years after the ban, some GPs within the constituencies of government ministers continue to use 0844 numbers. In the southeast of England, usage of 0844 numbers continues unabated. In any case, in 2013 the Consumer Rights Directive will soon make it illegal to use 084 and 087 numbers, indeed any number that costs more than geographic rate, for customer services and complaints. Where contracts are ending, GPs often choose to return to using 01 and 02 numbers even though 03 numbers cost the same for all callers. 2010 Introduction of 111 for non-emergency calls to NHS. In 2010, 111 was introduced on a trial basis for non-urgent calls to the NHS. The scheme is planned to roll out nationally in 2013 and at the time may replace the correct NHS Direct 0845 4647 line and the NHS 24 08454 24 24 24 line. 2010 additional number ranges within 0191 area code, extra capacity assigned in late 2010, following consultation. In the other 01x1 area codes, only 8xx, 9xx, 9xx and 5xx have yet to be allocated. 0171 and 0181 are no longer in use and 0101 and 0111 have never been allocated. 2010 Ofcom proposed changes in number conservation areas. In November 2010, Ofcom proposed to abandon renumbering in areas running short of capacity and instead provide extra capacity by starting to use local numbers beginning 0 and 1, and removing the option of dialing locally using just the subscriber number. Once the supply of new numbers released by this measure is exhausted, Ofcom propose introducing additional, overlay area codes to run in tandem with current codes. It is anticipated that the overlay codes would not be required before 2022. 2011 area name changes. By way of an errata to the National Telephone Numbering Plan, Ofcom started the lengthy process of correcting some very old errors for 9 area code names in December 2011. Some of these errors first appeared in the 2003 version of the number plan, while others can also be found in older data originally produced by Ofcom several years before. As noted on Ofcom's site, the name changes still have to go through a formal consultation process, even though they are only correcting obvious spelling, hyphenation and capitalization mistakes. The corrections are as follows: 2012 changes in local dialing. In November 2012, local dialing was removed for calls within the 01202 area, allowing subscriber numbers beginning 0 or 1 to be issued locally and buying more time before an additional area code or code change is required. 2013 changes in 080, 084 and 087 on geographic arrangements, after initial consultation in 2010 and 2012. In April 2013, Ofcom published the final consultation on proposals to rearrange the 080, 084 and 087 on geographic allocations in 2014. The 0870 range is to regain its revenue share status. Where users of 0870 numbers cannot justify revenue share, they are advised to move to their reserved matching 0370 number. The workings of the 0845 range will broadly align with how 0844 and 0843 revenue share numbers already work. Changes in how call costs for 084 and 087 on geographic calls should in future be communicated to callers were announced. The caller's phone line provider has to list a single access charge per tariff for the 084, 087, 09 and 118 non-geographic number ranges, and the called party has to display the single service charge details for their non-geographic number. Calls to the free-to-caller 080 range will be made free from mobile telephones, not just from landlines. Once the final announcements are made by Ofcom in the summer of 2013, the changes will have an 18-month transition period before coming into effect. Telephone numbers in overseas territories. Telephone numbers in British overseas territories do not come under the UK telephone numbering plan. These calls are treated as international calls. Below are the access codes for the overseas territories: North American numbering plan, Anguilla +1-264, Bermuda +1-441, British Virgin Islands +1-284, Cayman Islands +1-345. Montserrat +1-664, Turks and Caicos Islands +1-649, others, British Indian Ocean Territory +246, Falkland Islands +500, Gibraltar +350, St Helena and Tristan da Cunha +290, Ascension Island +247, Acrotiri and Picalia +357, Pitcairn Islands +64, see also, Big Number Change, List of dialing codes in the United Kingdom, List of UK dialing codes covering Wales, Non-geographic telephone numbers in the United Kingdom, Telecommunications in the United Kingdom, Telephone number portability, Telephone numbering plan, Telephone numbers in Ireland, UK telephone code misconceptions. Euro includes the common 0207 and 0208 misconceptions. Conebook.com, notes. References. External links: UK numbering policy section of Ofcom's website, UK National Telephone Numbering Plan, UK Future Numbering Plan from Ofcom's website, Ofcom, Telephone Area Code Tool, UK Dialing Code Lookup, Ralph Adam, Send a Boy a Euro, or Dial It Yourself. Numbering for the Information Society, ASLib Proceedings, 51-1, January 1999, Subscription Required, UK Telephone Numbering Plan in detail, UK Telephone Area Codes, UK Dialing Codes, UK Area Codes List, Regular Expressions for Validating and Formatting GB Telephone Numbers, the first 25 years of STD code changes summarised, UK British Telecom White Pages Directory, Say No to 0870, helps locate fee-free contact numbers for UK companies, 192uk.com, britishphonebook.com.